borrowed dream. The metronome clicked, clicked, clicked. Emeka slammed his palm over it, silencing the tiny mechanical heart, and stared at the sheet of manuscript paper in front of him. 43 measures of a string quartet movement that felt like someone else's handwriting. Because it was. Because everything about this room, this city, this life, felt like a coat he had borrowed and never returned. The fluorescent light above his desk buzzed faintly. Outside the narrow window of apartment 4B on Mapugu's quietest street, Seoul hummed its midnight hum. Convenience stores, glowing like altars, delivery bikes threading through rain-slicked alleyways, the Han River somewhere far below reflecting a city that never fully slept. Emeka pressed both hands flat on the desk and breathed through his teeth. 15 years. He had been building toward this for 15 years. He was 7 when his father, Dr. Chukwuemeka Okafor Sr., sat him on the piano bench in their Lekki home and placed his small hands on the keys. His father had played, not well, but with a reverence that bordered on religious. "This is the language of the civilized world, my son. You will speak it better than any of them." Emeka had been obedient, talented, and deeply, privately miserable about it ever since. He had a gift. Nobody disputed that. His gift was simply for a different thing entirely, and he had spent the better part of his life pretending otherwise. He picked up his pen and wrote 4 more notes. They were correct. They were lifeless. He put the pen down. From the other side of the thin wall separating their rooms, he heard Minho moving, the particular quiet shuffle of someone trying not to make noise, which in a 2-bedroom apartment with walls like paper was somehow louder than regular walking. Emeka checked his phone. 12:47 a.m. Minho had an anatomy practical at 7. The boy never slept before 2. Emeka had started to wonder why. He pushed back from his desk. Choi Minho was standing at the kitchen counter when Emeka came out, and the painting. Emeka stopped walking. The painting was propped against the refrigerator, still wet, a chaos of deep indigo and burnt orange, and something that was almost red but wasn't quite. It was a face, or it wanted to be, dissolving at the edges like a person halfway through disappearing. It was remarkable. Emeka had never seen anything Minho had made before because Minho made things in secret, the way some people drink in secret, out of shame or fear or both. Minho spun around. A paintbrush was still in his hand. His white t-shirt was ruined. "Yeah," he stepped instinctively in front of the canvas, which was both futile and heartbreaking. "I thought you were asleep." "I thought you were studying," Emeka said. Silence. They looked at each other across the length of the small kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. Something dripped from Minho's brush onto the linoleum floor, a fat drop of indigo, and neither of them moved to clean it. "How long?" Emeka asked. Minho's jaw tightened. He was 26, angular, with the permanent shadows of a man who slept poorly and studied ferociously, or pretended to. "Since I was 16, he said finally. "I paint when I can't sleep." "Which is every night?" "Yes." Emeka moved to the small kitchen table and sat down in one of the mismatched chairs. He didn't look away from the canvas. The face in it, whoever it was, wherever it was going, had an expression that Emeka recognized. He had seen it in the mirror. "Help me. Don't ask me to explain, just help me." "It's good," Emeka said. "That's not me being polite. It's genuinely good." Minho said nothing. He set the brush on the counter carefully, deliberately, like a man handling something he might break. Then he sat down across from Emeka, folded his arms, and stared at the table. "Don't," Minho said. "Don't what?" "Don't do what people do. Don't say so. Why aren't you doing this instead? Like it's a simple thing, like I can just..." He exhaled sharply through his nose. "My father is Choi Byungjun." Emeka waited. "He is the head of cardiology at Asan Medical Center. His father was a doctor. His grandfather served as a military surgeon during the war." Minho looked up. "I am the 4th generation. When I was born, my name was already on the hospital, not literally, but it might as well have been." The Vanderson clock on the microwave read 12:53. Emeka thought about his father's voice on the phone last Sunday. "How are the compositions coming, Emeka? Your professor, has he been impressed? Are you representing us well?" and felt something loosen in his chest that had been knotted there so long he had stopped noticing it as a knot and had just accepted it as part of his anatomy. "My father wants me to be a conductor," Emeka said, "or a composer, something with a stage and European credentials, something he can explain to his colleagues." Minho looked at him. "I make music too," Emeka continued. "But not this." He gestured vaguely toward Minho's studio setup in the corner. The audio interface, the second-hand 1500 controller Emeka kept telling himself was for academic experimentation. Afrobeats, high life, things that sound like Lagos at 4 in the morning when the generators are going and someone 3 streets over is playing talking drums and the sound gets into your blood and you don't choose to dance. Your body just... He stopped. He could hear himself. He could hear how alive he sounded, just describing it, how different that sounded from the way he talked about Brahms. Minho was watching him carefully. "You produce," Minho said. It wasn't a question. "I have a SoundCloud," Emeka said. "Under a fake name, 40,000 followers. My classical composition professor follows the account. I saw it once. He liked one of my tracks. He has no idea it's me." A strange, horrible laugh escaped him. "He told me last semester that I had good academic instincts, but lacked emotional spontaneity in my work." Minho stared at him for a long moment. Then, despite himself, he laughed too. A short, startled sound, like something breaking loose. Emeka laughed harder. They sat there in the small Korean kitchen at 1 in the morning, 2 men from opposite ends of the world, laughing at the same terrible joke their lives had become. When it faded, the silence that followed was different, softer, honest. In the weeks that followed, things between them shifted in the way that significant things shift, not all at once, but in increments, in small surrenders. Minho started leaving his canvases out, not displayed exactly, but no longer hidden either, propped against the hallway wall, stacked beside the shoe rack, leaning in corners where Emeka had to navigate around them to get to the kitchen. Emeka started playing. Not the composition exercises, not Bartok, not the academic work, but his own music, through headphones first, then eventually through the small Bluetooth speaker on the windowsill, quietly enough to stop if Minho seemed bothered. Minho never seemed bothered. Sometimes Emeka caught him pausing in the hallway, head tilted, listening before he thought Emeka was watching. They talked, more than they had in the 8 months they'd lived together, trading careful pleasantries and schedules and polite reminders about dish soap. They talked about their fathers. They talked about the specific physics of obligation, how it operates differently than love, but sometimes borrows love's face so perfectly you can't tell the difference until you're 30 years into a life that doesn't fit. They talked in English because it was the only language they fully shared, and there was something appropriate about that, Emeka thought, conducting the most honest conversations of his life in a language that belonged to neither of them. "When did you know?" Minho asked one night. They were on the rooftop of the building with convenience store soju and a bag of chips that had gone slightly stale. Seoul spread below them, relentless and luminous. "That you wanted music, your music, not his." Emeka thought about this seriously. "I was 50, there was a recording, Fela Kuti, Lady 1972. My uncle played it at a family gathering, and I felt it in a way I had never felt Beethoven, never felt any of the things I'd been trained to feel. It scared me so much I went home and practiced scales for 3 hours straight." He paused. "Like I could drown it out. Like if I was disciplined enough I could choose what moves me." Minho made a sound of recognition so deep it was almost involuntary. "I was 17, he said. "I was supposed to be studying, always. And instead, I had locked myself in my room with my mother's old oil paints, and I did this thing, this painting for 6 hours straight. And when I came out, my mother knocked and said dinner was ready. And I looked in the mirror, and I had paint on my face, and I was crying." He stopped. "I didn't know I'd been crying. I was somewhere else. I was entirely somewhere else." He looked at the skyline. "I have been trying to get back to that place every night since. I have not been back. Not all the way. Because you're afraid that if you go all the way back, you won't be able to come out and be who everyone needs you to be." Minho turned to look at him. "Yes," he said quietly. "Exactly yes." I know, Emeka said. I know. The crisis came the way crises do, not dramatically, but quietly with paperwork. Emeka received an email from the composition faculty informing him that his end-of-year thesis submission, a full orchestral work, 30 minutes minimum, was due in 11 weeks. He sat with the email open on his laptop for a long time. Then he opened GarageBand. Then he closed GarageBand. Then he walked to Minho's room and knocked. Minho opened the door in his medical scrubs, stethoscope still around his neck. He had come home late from clinical rotations, exhausted, and was clearly about to collapse. He took one look at Emeka's face and stepped aside. Emeka sat on the edge of Minho's bed. Minho sat in the desk chair, turning it to face him. I can't write it, Emeka said. I've tried. I sit down every night and I put notes on the page and they're technically correct and they mean absolutely nothing. They mean nothing because I mean nothing by them. There's no Emeka in any of it. There is only what my father hears when he imagines his son. Minho was quiet for a moment. What would happen, he said slowly, if you wrote what you actually hear? I'd fail the thesis requirements. What if you didn't? What? What if you wrote something that was actually yours, but within the form? Not Afrobeats, not a recording, an orchestral work, but one that came from you, from Lagos, from what moves you. Minho leaned forward. You told me once about the talking drums, about how the sound maps onto language, tone, pitch, rhythm, carrying actual words. That's not incompatible with Western orchestration. That's just orchestration no one in your department has heard before. Emeka stared at him. You have 40,000 people following the ghost version of you, Minho said. Imagine what the real one could make. The silence that followed felt different from all the silences before it. This one had weight. Possibility is heavier than emptiness. You should apply to art school, Emeka said. Minho shook his head. Minho, I'm not going to blow up my family for... I'm not saying blow anything up. Emeka met his eyes. I'm saying there might be a version of your future where you do both, medicine and painting, not as a secret, not at midnight. As yourself. He paused. Your father loves you. You've told me that. People who love you can sometimes, eventually, be brought around to the truth of who you are, if you tell the truth. Easy for you to say. It is not easy for me to say. My father is a man who has his son's entire life mapped on a wall in his office. There is a literal timeline. I have seen it. Emeka's voice was steady, but his hands, folded in his lap, were pressed together hard enough to whiten his knuckles. I am not telling you it won't hurt. I'm telling you the alternative is worse. The alternative is disappearing. Minho looked at him for a long time. The stethoscope hung from his neck like punctuation. Finally, quietly, he said, Show me how to start. Show me first, Emeka said. Show me how you actually paint. Not the hiding version, all the way. 3 weeks before the thesis deadline, Emeka called his father. He sat on the rooftop alone in the dark, phone warm in his hand, and he made himself dial before he could think better of it. His father answered on the second ring. He always answered on the second ring, as though the first was beneath urgency and the third was excessive. Emeka, how is the composition coming? Baba. Emeka closed his eyes. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you respond. Can you do that for me? A pause. His father's pauses were loaded, weighted architectural things. I am listening, and Emeka told him. Not everything, not the SoundCloud, not the fake name, not yet, but the shape of it. That he had been struggling, that the work he was producing felt empty to him, that he wanted to write something different for his thesis, something that came from a different place, and that the different place was Lagos, was their music, was the sound that had been living in him since before he had words for it. He spoke for 4 minutes without stopping. He had not prepared what to say, and he was grateful for it. Preparation would have let him edit, soften, disappear the important parts. When he finished, his father was quiet. The silence lasted long enough that Emeka checked his screen to see if the call had dropped. You remember, his father said at last, when you were 8 years old, You begged me for a keyboard, a synthesizer. You wanted to make, you called it computer music. A long exhale. I told you that was not serious music. I told you to practice your scales. Yes, Emeka said carefully. I have thought about that moment many times. His father's voice was different now, slower, rougher, stripped of its professional register. Your face when I said that. You went very still. You disappeared a little. Right in front of me. A pause. I told myself it was discipline, that I was teaching you discipline. Emeka said nothing. His throat had closed. Write what you hear, Emeka, his father said. Write what you actually hear, and then call me and play it for me. I want to hear what my son sounds like when he is fully himself. The thesis Emeka submitted 11 weeks later was 41 minutes long. Its program notes read, a concerto for orchestra and electronic percussion, structured around the tonal linguistic patterns of Yoruba talking drum tradition and the harmonic language of Lagos highlife, as filtered through the compositional framework of the Western String Quartet. His professor stood in the hallway afterward with his printed score in hand and a look on his face that Emeka couldn't immediately interpret, and then could, because it was the look of a man encountering something he hadn't expected and wasn't sure his existing categories could hold. This is not what I was expecting, his professor said. No, Emeka agreed. It's extraordinary. The professor looked up. Where has this been? Emeka thought of his father's voice, of Minho painting until 3 a.m. with no apology, of the apartment on Mapogu where two men had started slowly to take up the space their real selves required. It's been here, Emeka said. It needed time to come out. Minho did not leave medical school. He sat his father down over a long dinner and showed him on his phone photographs of every painting he had made in the last 3 years. Dr. Choi Byung-jun, head of cardiology at Asan Medical Center, fourth generation of an unbroken medical line, said very little for a very long time. Then he asked to see the real ones, the physical ones. He drove to the apartment on Mapogu on a Saturday morning and stood in Minho's small room, surrounded by canvases stacked 4 deep, and said, in a voice Minho had never heard his father use, "You have been carrying all of this alone. Not a condemnation, a recognition. The difference between those two things is everything. The other, that in fact, the discipline of medicine made him a more rigorous painter, and the interiority of painting made him a more present doctor." His father came to his first group exhibition in the spring. He stood in front of the dissolving indigo face, the one Emeka had first seen propped against the refrigerator on a midnight kitchen floor, and was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I see you in this. I finally see you." Emeka played his first public performance of original music 3 months later, not under a fake name, in a small venue near Hongdae, the kind of place that smells. Minho enrolled in weekend classes at the Seoul Art Center the following semester. He did not stop studying medicine. He began, instead, the long, strange, necessary project of being 2 things at once. And finding that neither one cancelled the like old wood and honest effort, he performed a live set that folded his thesis work into something looser, warmer, more alive. He put it on SoundCloud under his real name. 40,000 followers from the old account followed him there. He called his father from outside the venue after, ears still ringing, and described every moment of it. His father, Dr. Chukwuemeka Okafor Sr., listened to all of it. At the end he said, "Send me the recording. I want to play it for your mother." It wasn't resolution exactly. Life rarely gifts you resolution. What it gifts you when you are lucky are moments of alignment. Instants where the person you are and the life you are living briefly, beautifully, occupy the same space. Emeka and Minho had both spent years in the space between who they were and who they were performing, and closing that distance had not been dramatic. It had been the quiet accumulation of small, true things. A painting left out past midnight, a song played without headphones, a phone call made before the courage ran out, a father's voice saying, "Play it for me," instead of the thing you always feared he'd say. The metronome on Emeka's desk still clicked, but now when he reached for it, he was reaching to begin, not to silence something. The music that came after was his, fully, recklessly, joyfully his, and it sounded, finally, like the city he had always carried inside him. Lagos under Seoul, alive and loud and absolutely unapologetic, talking drum rhythms threaded through string quartets, high life harmonics ascending into something new. The sound of a man who had borrowed someone else's dream for 15 years and had, at last, come home.